Welcome to the return of the Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, November 23rd. We started our meeting down the hall in the FinCom room, and we were talking about borrowing for the middle school project. So now we're recontinuing our meeting, and before we get started with the tax classification hearing, I want to turn it over to Glenn.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on a lighter note, if Ian could come up, Ian Jacob is here. He's a Life Scout, a Boy Scout with Troop 44 in Walpole. And Ian reached out to me. Let's come up to the microphone, Ian, just real quick.
Welcome.
Thanks for coming in. So Ian reached out to me, and he's working on some things with Troop 44, which I have very fond memories of, and Troop 44 has done a lot of good things in Walpole. They produce a lot of good community leaders, and Ian reached out and asked, how do you get involved in town meetings and learning more about government? So I said, we'll come to a meeting tonight, and we are talking about some pretty consequential and important things. And so I thought it might be good if he has time to sit through the meeting. Ian, could you just introduce yourself and tell us, I guess you're working on a merit badge right now?
Hi, I'm Ian Jacob. I'm from Troop 44 Walpole. I'm a Life Scout, as Mr. Maffey said. I'm working on citizenship in the community, and one of the main points of scouting is to be a good citizen, whether it be locally, nationally, or even internationally. So,
yeah, and just by coming here tonight, you're being a good citizen and watching and learning kind of how the process works. You'll see some of what we're working on tonight. There's a tax classification hearing. So what we decide tonight, if we do make a decision, will impact every single taxpayer in Walpole. So it's good to have you, and keep on doing the good work.
thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks for coming in.
I'd also say, if you ever have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to any of the select board or town administrator, Jim Johnson, who's over in the corner. So glad you have an interest. With the time being 7:05, we have a public hearing for tax classification.
Make a motion to open the tax classification public hearing.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Jack, come on up. How you doing? Welcome.
Good to see you again. I'm going to hand this out. This is just the usual kind of summary of the whole thing about how someone pays for taxes. Oh, sorry. Could I have one more? Do you have an extra one? Thanks, Terry. It's a lot because sorry. This is a kind of a standard handout I give every year at the beginning of the hearing, because a lot of people just want to know what are they going to pay in taxes and who's responsible for it. And it turns out there's multiple people responsible for the different elements that go into what an individual property owner will pay for taxes. Your annual taxes is basically your assessment times your tax rate. Property assessments, that's determined as of January 1st, okay? And it's based upon sales data that we've reviewed over the last year or two before then, so it's always a little bit dated because of the because of the lag between when we actually make the determination, property determination, value determination, which is as of January 1st of this year, but we have to look at the previous year's data. So the state comes in and takes a very hard look, particularly in the 5-year cycle that we're on right now. And the assessment for every individual property in Walpole is determined by the Board of Assessors. The residential tax rate, what goes into that? It's the planned expenditures. And that's determined by town meeting, or if there's an override by the voters. The total assessed value of all real estate value is basically the individuals all added up. And then the residential factor, this is what we're here for tonight. That's your decision. It's a policy decision of how much or if you want to shift some of the residential tax burden to the commercial, industrial, and personal properties. So there's the Board of Selectmen, there's the Board of Assessors, there's town meeting, there's the voters, and then there's the state who has to approve the whole process. So it's there's multiple people involved in the whole thing, and this is a process that starts at the end of January, and it goes through until the tax bills are mailed out the last week of December. So it's a long and lengthy process and a very careful process. I think all of you have seen the package that we gave to you, okay? And I know there's been some questions about it. You've come and asked for some additional analysis in places. And what I'm going to do is, rather than walk through each and every page, which is 35 pages, what I'm going to do is I'm going to point out some particular things that I think of interest and importance. And then if you have any questions, With me is Dennis Fliss, our Director of Assessing, and our newest board member, Richard Carroll. So right in page 2, it talks about the shift or the residential factor. Most people talk about the shift. Right now, it's at 1.275. What that means is that the commercial, industrial, and personal property total taxation, the total amount to be raised by taxation is increased by 27.5%. What you will actually be voting on tonight is a residential factor, which is the weighted reciprocal of that. And there's a table that will go through that as you go through it. On page 4, I'm sorry, on page 5, this is the effect of the shift on different classes of property. As you can see down the bottom, there's a summary right there. Okay, residential, if we were to go ahead and adopt if you were to adopt the shift of 1.275, the percentage of the percentage of the total taxation raised by residential would go from 87.12% down to 83.57%. And commercials and industrials and personal property would go up. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. On page 7, this is the calculation of the levy. All right, I put this is put in here as part of the package. This is actually what gets submitted to the state. However, one of the things to point out is you could go back 25 years. This form is exactly the same. Our levy limit is what our levy was last year, plus 2.5%, plus any override, plus new growth. And that's how it's calculated every year. It's the limit on what you can raise the levy to. So for example, for this year, for 2022, our base from last year was $78,212,188. Okay, add 2.5%, that's the 1.955305. Add new growth, 1.582097. And we had no new overrides, and so what we have is now a levy limit of $81,749,590. And this is done the same way every year. There's no magic to it. It's just 2.5% plus new growth plus any overrides. New growth, this is on page 9. A little bit about new growth. New growth is a dynamic number that really doesn't get set until we get the final certification from the state. And that's just within the last couple weeks. Okay. We start early in the budget process. We give the town administrator an initial estimate, and that gets updated quarterly or something like that. And right now, our new growth number is at 1.562097. That is not growth, that is not increase in value due to sales, but that's increase in value due to construction or changes, okay? And the state takes a very hard look at that because this is an increase over and above 2.5%. So they take a very hard look at that. They come in and they do an analysis of what we put in for new growth. And it is to the level of detail that when someone goes ahead and rips down a deck and puts on a porch, we have to take the value of the deck that was ripped off and just go with and subtract that from the full value, the full increase in sales value just due to the full porch. Okay, on page 12, this is where you could actually get into a calculation on the shift versus the residential factor. You're going to normally what you do is you think about the shift, and on page 13 it's 1.275. So if you were to choose to adopt the current shift, you would actually be voting on a residential factor of 0.9593. And it shows the impact on the different categories of property. When you get to page 15 and 16, I think these are the key pages, okay? This is where you actually see what the impact is on the taxes for different classes of property, residential versus commercial versus industrial. So as an example, on page 14, okay, if you look at the bold one right there in the middle, the average assessed value for residential property in Walpole this year is $591,350. Okay, if we adopt, if a tax rate, a shift of 1.275 is adopted, then the tax rate would be $14.46, and the total tax bill would be $8,551. If you adopted a lower number, then you can see it would go up a little bit, and if you adopted a higher number, it would go down. Okay? The impact to the commercial and industrial is on the next page, page 16. There's a little bit of an anomaly in here. Right now, what it does, it shows the average commercial property going down is to 870. We had some discussion about this. You asked some questions. We provided you with a spreadsheet that basically shows that this number is actually skewed quite a bit based upon the fact that there were properties that had, commercial properties that had a lot of impact due to COVID. Gyms, hotels, some of the retail stores and so forth like that. So, and that was in the spreadsheet that you had asked for. On page 17, this is kind of a property value history of what's happened to property values, what's happened to the average tax bill and the average increase over the last 20 years, I think is in here. Actually, no, it's back to 2010, so 12 years. One thing that we're always asked about is what's on page 19. How does Walpole compare to other communities in the area? And what you have is, if you look at not just the neighboring communities, but those that are in the area, you see shifts that go all the way from 1.75 as a Dedham down to Dover, which has no shift at all. Okay. Those that have the large shifts tend to be those that have a lot of commercial and industrial personal property. But you can see what those are. And then finally, on page 23, is just a history of what we've had for tax rates, what the shift has been. Currently, the shift that you've adopted over the last, since 2014 is 1.275. And then there was about a 6 or 7 year period of time there where it was 1.25. And it gradually had worked its way up since it was a split tax rate was adopted back in 1990. So if there's any questions at all?
Before you open it up, I just want to clarify one thing.
Sure.
Sure.
So the sheet you handed out, Jack, says .95993. On page 13, you said it says .9593. So which, I just want to verify. So is there a
Correct
9?
number will be on it.
Which page?
Page 13, it says
That's the correct one.
9593, so
Oh,
Extra 9 on
there's an
the,
extra 9. Just wanted to make sure, because I can
It's a
throw that
typo.
off. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Okay. All right.
So I'm going to open it up to questions in just a minute, but first I want to say thanks for getting us the packets ahead of time, so we had time to dig through. I know that the assessors oftentimes give us a recommendation on what should happen with the shift. I know that last week when you met, you didn't make a decision, you didn't reach a conclusion, and you weren't able to get a meeting posted in time to give us a recommendation as a board. So I will let anyone who's here from the Board of Assessors who wants to speak tell us their personal opinion as opposed to the board decision. So I just wanted to state that for the record.
Okay, I'm going to hold off, Mark.
Okay.
Simply because I don't want to do it while I'm standing up here as the chairman. I apologize for the administrative snafu, but I think that we were able to move forward, and what's important is that we have the decision tonight so that we can get the tax bills out in time. We have 5 weeks to get them out, and it's a busy 5 weeks. This is not the last step in the process.
No, we
Multiple
understand.
steps after this, and a lot of them are time-consuming, and we rely on outside vendors, for example, to print the bills and get them mailed.
So I'm going to open it up for questions in just a moment, but we did also get a letter from the Economic Development Committee basically asking us to keep the shift where it stands. And from their point of view, I think they'd like to see it go the other way, to lower it for commercial and industrial over time, because that would help them, that would help the town bring more business in. And that's always something we have to weigh, the impact on taxpayers versus the impact on commercial and industrial and personal property. Because we don't want to shift too much one way and burden the residents, and we don't want to shift it too much the other way and drive businesses out of town. So having said that, I'll open it up for questions. Glenn?
I probably have some comments, but I'd like to hear from other people
Okay,
before I
sure.
make my comments, yeah.
Ben? I'll come back, so,
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the members
Okay.
of the board before we.
Dick, you want to,
Good evening.
welcome?
Thank you for having us. Our fellow board member, Bob Bushway, I'm sure he would like to be here tonight, but he told us he had a conflicting appointment on his schedule, so he's unable to attend. On that note, I'll keep it brief, and I do have some prepared comments for you I'd like you to think about hardly. So my name is Dick Sicaro, and I'm a newly elected member of the Tax Assessors Board. It is unfortunate that we, as an elected board, are unable to give you our recommendation on the tax shift tonight, as Mr. Gallivan so eloquently stated the reason. I am also a resident and taxpayer in Walpole, and I would suggest and urge you to vote for a tax shift of 1.35 from the customary 1.275 that would give the average residential taxpayer approximately a $100 tax reduction from $296 to $196 in fiscal year 2022. This would especially help them out in light of the fact that the middle school override that takes effect in fiscal year 2023 will be devastating to the average homeowner, particularly the elderly and others who are on fixed limited incomes. You can also credit new growth towards a residential tax break. Unfortunately, 87% of the tax levy is on the backs of the residential homeowners who are unable to pass on these unsustainable tax increases year after year, as multi-apartment owned properties and condominium owned properties can by increasing their tenants' rent. Also, commercial owned properties can also pass the tax increases on their end product user by raising their prices. And I'll close with this. As the great late President Harry S. Truman once said, "The buck stops here." The same holds true for you as members of the Town of Walpole Select Board as far as the tax rate that you choose for the residents going forward. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I hope you take my suggestions to heart. Thank you.
Thank you. I did want to correct one thing that you said. So 87% of the assessed value in the town, Jack, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 87% of the assessed value of the real estate in town is residential. But because of the shift, only 83% of the taxes are paid by the residences. Did I get that right, Jack? Okay. So I just wanted to clarify that, because otherwise people are going to ask us, how come there's, what was the impact of the shift? So I just wanted to mention that. Jack, do you want to weigh in with your recommendation or any further comments as an individual?
I want to make it clear, I'm speaking as an individual, not as a member of the Board of Assessors.
Understood.
Okay, just, I think that I want to say this carefully. I think that we need to look very carefully down the road, because we have a big impact coming down the road when we start to get the impact of the override for the Bird Middle School project, okay? Right now, we're in a position where the increase has been average, and it's continued to be average over the last several years, of somewhere between 2.5% to 3%, depending upon the particular residential property. I personally think that if you go ahead and you look at that, the impact, the potential impact to increasing the shift, when you do a careful analysis on the commercial properties, the impact has been also felt by the commercial properties. And to shift more of that the tax burden towards the commercial properties at this particular point in time, I think is probably not the best decision. I think you're gonna wanna manage your tax rate going down the road. And I think this allows you more latitude to do it. I don't think there's any need to go ahead and do it. I mean, it's always nice to reduce taxes, don't get me wrong. I'd like to have a smaller tax bill too. But right now, we've been fairly stable about the way it's been approached from both the commercial, industrial, and personal property and the residential over the last several years in terms of the increase. And I don't see any strong reason to go ahead at this particular point and do an increase in the shift. You may want to take a look at it down the road, but I think at this particular point in time, it's a little bit premature. That's my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Mr. Chairman,
Ben, any other?
can I add one thing?
Sure.
As a personal taxpayer, I also urge you next year to take into consideration that the tax tips that we're so generously giving to many large companies, who once again can write this off, if that tip is reduced, that's new growth, and it should be counted towards new revenue. And I really would have you think about maybe crediting that to the residential homeowners as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Ben, any further questions or comments?
Are we going around now?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'd just start with one other clarification of some of the information that was put out there tonight, and I feel like I say this every year. It was alluded to, by the chair of the Board of Assessors a minute ago. But there are 3 pieces of information that go into the residential tax rate in Walpole. We are not here tonight setting the tax rate for the town of Walpole. That is an inaccurate statement. What we're doing is setting the shift between commercial and residential, as was explained. The planned expenditures for the town on an annual basis is set by town meeting, and the assessed valuation of all real and personal property is done by the Board of Assessors. And so with those 3 pieces of information from 3 different elected boards comes the tax rate of Walpole. So I just want to say that one more time so that everyone's clear on it. I guess my first comment when we, talk about changing the split from 1,275, and Mrs. Zaccaro, member of the Board of Assessors, had said that maybe we ought to consider changing it to 135. And so that would reduce, based on these charts in this package that aren't on the screen for people watching at home, that would reduce the residential bill on average for the average home by $100. And it would increase the commercial. Excuse me. And it would increase.
Come up front. We don't have any control over the internal speakers, so just come on up.
It would increase the. I kind of feel like I'm yelling already, but.
Go ahead, just do the best you can.
That would increase the commercial and the residential. The commercial would be increased by 1,200, and the industrial would be, 1,200, and the industrial would be increased by 1,000. So, with every increase or decrease from industrial or residential, there's a change on the other side. And so, my concern is at this point, we have a lot of residents that are hurting from the pandemic and the causes and the financial impacts. And in the same token, we have a lot of industrial and commercial companies that are hurting from the impact of the pandemic. Personally, when I try to weigh those one against the other, I find that it's difficult to choose one over the other. I think we heard from the EDC, which represents the development in town. They would prefer it remain the same. What I tend to think in times of unrest or unease, which we're clearly in now with the pandemic, is it's best to stay the course with what we have. And I don't see any reasonable fact that has been put forward that says, well, we need to go this way or the other for any particular reason, because everybody is hurting. However, that being said, and I know it was alluded to by Mr. Fisher as well, looking down the road, I think we need to really seriously look at the split and understand what we're going to be doing the next, even 1 year from now, 1 to 5 years, and seriously consider, raising it and moving in that direction. I'm not opposed to that, but based upon what I've heard tonight and the information in this packet, I think it's the most feasible and reasonable alternative to the town, for the town to keep this shift the same. But I look forward to hearing more about what my fellow board members say as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ben, that makes a lot of what you said makes a lot of sense. Because we have such a heavy residential tax base in Walpole, 87% of our assessed value, I think it is residential, which means that in order to get that $100 reduction for 87% of the assessed value in Walpole, the other 13% needs to shoulder most of the burden. Now, the current shift we have now brings that down to 83%. So there is a shift toward the commercial side already, and increasing that, especially coming out of COVID, I think is unwise. So I'm not prepared to do that. I look at the commercial businesses in Walpole, and yes, they could write off some of this expense and they can pass along some of this to their customers, but only to a certain extent. So I think we need to tread carefully. In order to get that $100 reduction, there is a cost on the commercial side. We want to encourage businesses to come to Walpole. We want to support the ones that are already in Walpole. There are some communities that don't do a shift at all, Sharon and Norfolk, because they have no tax base, or very little. So any shift in the town of Norfolk is going to be a really inordinate impact on the commercial. So they don't shift, and that's just the way that community operates. So Walpole is, we're lucky to have some commercial tax base. We have Route 1, we have some industrial parks, so we can rely on that to some extent, but we just have to be careful about pushing it too far. So, in future years, I would obviously consider this each year, but this year, I want to keep it the same. That's where I'm at.
Thanks, Glenn. Jim?
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the same spot that both Glenn and Ben are, but I have a few questions, and maybe, Jack, maybe I could put them to you. So, first of all, can you talk about the change year over year, last year to this year, in terms of the percentage of the tax levy that's paid by what I'll broadly call the commercial side of the house? And I'll use that term recognizing that that's commercial, industrial, and personal. But I'm just going to keep it simple, talking about it from a commercial point of view. And then, on the residential side, so what is the percent of the levy last year to this year paid by both sides?
On page 22, Jim, on the packet.
Yep.
That goes back through 1996. The percent paid by each one of the classes of properties. And so if you look carefully, you'll see that beginning in 22, assuming the same shift, right now at a 1.275 for 2022, residential will be 83.5729. Last year was 83.6408, a tenth of a percent. And if you go all the way back down there, you'll see that it's a couple of years it went up to 84, a couple of years it went down to 82, but it's always been in that range. All right, commercial, industrial, we've been able to manage to keep the percentage paid by each one of those classes of property reasonably stable, and that's important. The stability is really for planning purposes, okay? So that page right there, that's going to tell you that for a Walpole residents, between last year and this year, there's a tenth of a percent difference in the total amount of taxation raised by that class of property.
And so, in a way, that's a shift. Is that true?
Yes.
So we need to keep that in mind, that there's already a shift because of the way the assessments worked year to year. Now, I'm also inclined to say that as we look ahead down the road, to your point earlier, that we take a hard look at the shift. This year, I don't think we should be changing it. I don't think there's a compelling reason to do so. The override is not included in this year's levy. It will be starting next year and certainly the year after that. And so I think we should be looking at the shift as we go into the next couple of years to strike whatever the proper balance is, because that middle school is an expensive proposition and does have a big impact on residential taxes. One other thing that I wanted to just ask about is, if I look at just the commercial slice of what I've been broadly describing as commercial, what happened to the assessed values of commercial? So the malls, the hotels, that kind of thing, versus the industrial, where the industrial, makes things. And then also the personal, not to be confused with residential, but the personal, which are things like pipes in the ground that utility companies own. Can you talk about what happened in those three components?
Yeah, we actually gave that to you in the spreadsheet at the end of last week. Couple of things. First of all, for the commercial properties, some of the commercial properties took a big hit. Those that were service-oriented, those that were some of the retails, the gyms, the hotels took a big hit because their value is based upon occupancy rates, and the occupancy rates plummeted last year. So what you saw was a big difference in some of the properties, some of the commercial properties, simply because they were providing the kinds of services, selling the kinds of services that were badly impacted by the COVID process. But if you go through all of them, okay, a lot of them, most of them actually had a small increase. And so, I kind of hesitate to say this, but I will. So what happens is, if you go ahead and take an average, the average showed that there was an overall decrease in commercial. But if you look at the median, that's not the case, simply because it was skewed by these very large properties that had a big impact due to COVID. Industrial, there wasn't too much of an impact. They produce things, okay? It's not like a gym or a hotel or something like that. And personal property, one of the problems we had with personal property is the state changed the way they did valuations on Eversource and the public utilities. And what happened is, when they changed that had an impact on the personal property piece of the taxation for the utilities. And so they went up. Right now, what's happened is several, I think at least Boston and a couple of other cities have a court case against, Eversource has a court case against Boston and a couple of the other cities because of they're basically challenging the way they determined the valuations for personal property. That's going to take years to get sorted out. We don't know what's going to happen in Walpole. We're trying to put some money aside in the overlay account so that we don't take a big hit down the road. But that's basically for those three things that go into what we call the CIP: commercial, industrial, and personal property. Personal property went up because of the valuation technique that the state has now mandated. Industrial went up, but just pretty much average. Commercial, the average went down because of it was skewed because of the large number, or because of the large decrease in valuation for some of the properties negatively affected by COVID.
So as we come out of COVID and occupancy rates improve, what will happen to the assessed values of those commercial companies?
They'll go up.
They would go up.
Yeah, because it's based upon fair market value analysis. And if you've got a hotel that's got an occupancy rate of 30% versus one that's got 75%, the one that's got a 75% occupancy rate is going to sell for a much better price.
So one of the expectations we could have is that over the course of the next year or two, as we finally do come out of this pandemic and economic conditions improve, that we'd see the assessed values of the commercial component of that, as I call it, broad commercial base. The commercial component would go up in assessed value, which would mean more taxes paid by the commercial side of the house when that happens.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's a fair assessment, Jim.
Yeah. So when I think about the overall, the CIP, commercial, industrial, and personal. Commercial component went down, assessed value, industrial up, personal up. Personal went up a lot. And what I see when I combine personal and industrial, they actually overcome the deficit that happened in the commercial side. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And so overall, the assessed value of commercial, again, my broad CIP definition of commercial, the assessed value went up.
Yes.
which is why the percentage of the levy being paid by CIP is actually higher this year than it was last year. And the residential component is lower this year than it was last year.
Right, minimally, it's 1/10%.
Agreed,
But
agreed.
it's, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly
Yeah.
what happened.
And so I've always been a supporter of business in the town. I think we need to grow our commercial base. I think we need to look for ways to continue to improve the commercial base. I also think that as we are coming out of COVID, we've talked, and as a board, we've talked about this, what can we be doing to help the commercial side of the equation? And that ultimately has a long-term benefit to the residential side, because if the commercial side starts to get smaller because they're not viable for whatever reason, which can include taxes, that just means that the balloon gets squeezed over to the residential side. So it's to our benefit to grow the commercial side of the assessed value of the town, so that more and more and more of the burden of taxes gets paid by the commercial side of the house. True? And so when I think about a shift that works against that, I'd feel like we're arguing against ourselves in terms of trying to avoid what I think of as a death spiral in the business side of the equation. I want to see the commercial, industrial, and personal side go up in value, not go down. And so by not shifting, by keeping it the same as we are today, I think we're actually acting in support of that kind of thinking, which is to advance the commercial tax base in the town. So when I think about that, combined with the fact that the C component of CIP is probably going to come back in assessed value over the next 3 years, therefore attracting more and more of the taxes, I don't think there's a reason to change the shift today. Now, I'll go back to what I said in the very beginning, which is with that middle school override, the burden on the residential taxpayer has gone up quite a bit. I do think that when we see the results of coming out of COVID, what the impact to the commercial side is, and what the ultimate impact to the taxpayers on the residential side is from the borrowing, I do think we're going to have to take a hard look at the shift and perhaps make an adjustment in the next year or two. But right now, I don't see a reason to do that. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Jim. Nancy?
To build on, to not repeat what Jim said, I'm also thinking that because I've had a lot of roller coaster with the whole thought of this, having done it, especially as long as I've been doing this, is industry that also on the town level, maybe we should also be going one step further and making sure that industry is offered in more locations, maybe in some of our commercial areas too, that coming out of COVID, that there might be a shift of what kind of space we are going to need. If the cities are going to be really trying to entice workers back that are in office spaces and things like that, they're probably going to do things to be drawing away from Walpole. And if that's the case, that we should also be looking at some trends to see what we can do to make sure that if Walpole needs to evolve to maybe encourage different kinds of business, that we should definitely be looking and planning for that. Also, as far as Mr. Zaccaro, taxpayers and talking about the taxpayer, we know, we are all taxpayers. Each and every one of us up here is a taxpayer, whether we're a residential taxpayer, a business taxpayer. We live here, we've got kids here too. We're pretty representative as far as if you look at all of us, that we kind of check all the boxes. I have parents that live here, I have in-laws that live here that all pay taxes in this town. Some of us, I have college kids, I have teenagers that are eating me out of house and home. We've got, preschoolers and young kids that are here. We've got kids, adults that have children, grown children that are looking at the new housing market and trying to afford Walpole. Or towns around. So we get it. We're not up on a cloud somewhere that we don't know what's going on. We all do. That being said, we built, we've had a big plan and we built a lot of things within the budget to make sure that we didn't keep going for overrides or go for overrides and burden the residential or even the businesses, and we did a lot, and we invested in Walpole. We overwhelmingly just had, which sent a message to me, because I have been thinking about this, because the shift talk in the business side and the residential side, I mean, a lot of years I've been listening. And the vote for the middle school was so overwhelming that it's telling me that even though all those other parents that are out there struggling, and all the other grandparents that are maybe struggling, they still sent us a message that it's really important to invest in Walpole. I do think it will be important, we've talked about the ARP money, you know, see what we can do for the small business, see how we can help them and bring that money back to them. And it is actually the first time I've seen a letter from the EDC that said maintain the existing tax. Usually they've got it up or down and they've got a thought, but you know, they're the group that we put together to ask that opinion, and that's what has come back to us. And then Jack, you just really struck a chord, and I know Ben said it, stability. If we want to send the message to potential businesses or potential residential buyers, the message we want to send them is that we're stable. We're a stable community that has invested in our facilities. We have invested in our schools. You know, I mean, I think you go downtown and the restaurants, they're outside no matter what the weather is. They're like packed. You know, the parking lot up at the mall looks like it's doing pretty well too. You know, I think we're doing a really good job. I agree that maybe in the future, and especially with the override coming through, and then paying attention to recovery and also paying attention to the building needs, that there's a balance of watching the tax and watching our zoning and what we're encouraging. But long and short, it's not an easy decision. We put all of us put a lot of time into this. All of you put a lot of time into giving us the information that we have. But I am very much in support of keeping it the same for now. But that's why we do it every year.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yep.
And I'll just state for the record that, I don't want to reiterate points that have already been made, but I'm also in favor of keeping the shift where it is this year, so.
Did we have,
You have something new?
sorry to interrupt, but are there other people that wanted to speak? I don't know if we give everyone enough time.
One thing.
Okay, sure.
To address Selectwoman McKenzie's comments, since they were directed at me. Also, keep in mind, when you're looking at commercial businesses, a lot of the owners of commercial business do not reside in Walpole. They pay no other taxes. Residents do. They pay excise taxes, licenses, and a lot of other fees to this community. So they deserve, I would say, at least $100 tax break for fiscal 2022. Now, the other option I never discussed is
Dick,
we-
you said you had one point,
Right,
and you
the
just stated
capability
that,
of a
so.
residential tax exemption. The assessed value would be $591,000. Anyone's home that's assessed under that would get a tax break. The burden would shift on anyone whose home is over $591,000 in assessed value, and a lot of communities are considering that. So that's my last comment, and I urge you also to get out the information to the elderly in this town, all the other tax exempt programs that we have. And I'm a board member on the elderly tax relief program as well. And we encourage people to apply for that for a $1,000 exemption. And they can also do the work program for a $1,000 exemption. So that should be publicized in every media outlet we have. So once again, I want you to seriously consider my suggestions. Thank you again.
Thanks.
I'll-
Nancy?
Being on that board is excellent, and so if you guys can offer us some ways to get more information out, we would, love to hear them and entertain it, because it is really important to make sure that we get that information to the public and to the seniors and the people that need it. Thank you.
So I hadn't really planned to go to the public, but it sounds
I
like,
didn't
that's okay.
realize.
I'm not opposed. If there's anybody in the public that would like to make a new comment, I'm happy to give you a minute
Can
up
I-
at the microphone.
Can I just
Sure.
have one point? To what Mr. Zakara just said about the residential tax exemption, that's something that we've talked about in all the years that I've been here. It's something that we've bandied around. There's never been support for it. There's a ton of information in that packet on it. I, for one, am more than happy to talk further on that. I think it's a really balanced and reasonable idea moving forward for the town. So I would just simply say that at least myself would be open to talking more about that. And it's something we've discussed a lot before, so. Thanks, Mark.
Linda, I'll give you a minute. Something new?
My name's Linda Coletti. I live in Precinct 4. And I just want to say, I'm very nervous because I'm like $1,000 shy from having to sell my house. I don't have much money left in the bank. I know that's not your problem. It's my problem. But it's, a lot of seniors are so worried right now, along with me, because of the taxes becoming overwhelming. And I do know that Rhode Island has a system to save some of the seniors from having to sell their home and possibly moving out of the town that they love. And that could happen to me and others. And I don't want to leave Walpole. There's really not a lot of places to go either in Walpole. 'Cause that's another thing we have to look at. But I was just wondering if there's any way at all we could come together as a group, as a unit, and become united and do something for some relief through a system of tax credits, refunds, and appropriations from the general fund to the elderly and/or disabled person who own or rent their own home. Can we look at those things and see if we can't come up with a plan?
So as I've mentioned to you before, because we've had this conversation, those are not things we're going to discuss today, because that's not on our agenda. That would be a good topic, maybe to bring up with the Board of Assessors, or, Ben said that he's open to having any kind of a discussion along those lines. But that's not a topic for tonight. So we're here tonight really just to set the shift so that the Finance Department can move ahead with getting tax bills out on time and going through the state process. I understand what you're saying, and I understand the issues, but the hard part is every time you make a shift to save a certain group money, someone else has to pick up the burden. So that's why, although there's a lot of good ideas on what we can do to help certain people, groups, businesses, whatever it may be, the hard part collectively is how would that impact everybody else? So I think it's certainly worth having discussions. Just tonight is not the right time to do
Okay.
that, so. Nancy?
Possibly, we could have Jim and Kerry at the senior center look into maybe getting a speaker, someone that is versed in all of this and what other communities offer, and then sit down and evaluate and see if Walpole is doing enough, or if there's other programs that are out there that we should be doing.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a good idea, Nancy. Anybody else? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion to adopt a shift of 1.275 with a residential factor of .9593 for fiscal year 2022.
Second?
So your motion a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you.
I make a motion to authorize the town administrator to submit the results of this hearing on behalf of the Select Board to the Massachusetts Division of Local Services Gateway System.
Second?
So your motion a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for coming in.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Next up, with the time being after 9:35, Carl Baldoff, Town Engineer, seeking vote from the board for taking and acceptance documents. Oh, thank you. I wondered what I did with that. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening to the chair and members of the board. I'm here. We delivered a memorandum dated November 16th outlining the steps you need to complete the acceptance process for Olmsted Lane and Emerald Way, a portion of Emerald, I should say. That memo basically asks you to vote an order of taking to take the public rights for Olmsted Lane, to do the same for Emerald Way, and to vote to accept the easements that were conveyed by the developer in the beginning of the subdivision. And once you do those votes, we'll ask you to sign those documents. The epilogue, so to speak, this is the final step in making these things public. The epilogue is that we'll take them down and record them very shortly after you do this.
Great. Anybody have any questions for Carl?
I'll make a motion to accept the rights and easements related to Emerald Way portion and Olmsted Lane and sign the acceptance documents.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to take the public rights in Emerald Way portion and sign the order of taking documents.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion to take the public rights in Olmsted Lane and sign the order of taking documents.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Carl.
Thanks, Carl.
The time being after 7:40, do we have anybody here for open forum? I see nobody rising. Let's move on with new business. Jim?
Sure. What you have before you is the 2022 licenses for review and a vote of the board. Request your signatures. They have been digitally scanned. They're for parking lots, motel, hotel, lodging houses, common vehicular, class 1, 2, 3 motor vehicle, and automatic amusement device. And before you make a motion, I just would want to say, Aoife here has done an excellent job over the last year digitizing all these. She did so much work in such a short period of time, and everybody from the building department to conservation to planning to Board of Health, go on down the line, are using this software system now, and she's done a great job. The people out in the streets are using it, the property owners and the businesses. It's been well received. It's gone a lot smoother than it ever has before, and she's doing an excellent job. So thank you.
Thank you.
I don't mean to embarrass you.
I'll make a motion to renew the 2022 parking lot, hotel, motel, lodging house, common victual license, class 1, 2, and 3 motor vehicle and automatic amusement device licenses as listed in the document attached. Is there a number on it?
No, it was just on the agenda.
Okay. And have the board's official signatures digitally scanned.
Wow.
Just step forward.
Really stepping forward.
Whoa.
So I'll second that. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
LED streetlight conversion. Jim?
So I'm just asking Patrick to come up because honestly, he's been the driving force on this one. And I just want to make sure I don't miss anything with this. So just a brief history of this. We've been working on this since the town was designated as a green community just about a year ago. One of the projects that the board immediately bought into was the conversion of the streetlights. I like it because it's saving the town money, and we get to eventually realize those costs within the next few years. But there are some upfront costs. Town meeting appropriated $800,000 this past fall towards it. We also received $166,203 from the green communities to go towards it. So what we're doing here tonight, we've already conducted an audit and design of the streetlights. We're looking for the board to award 3 different contracts. The acquisition of the streetlights by the utility company, so that's to purchase the streetlights from Eversource. We've got them to come down a little bit from the original estimate of 206. They're down to 191. We continue to work with them to see if there's any other cost savings there. Quite honestly, they've been pretty good to work with. They put a couple of their top people on it. We've done a lot of Zoom meetings and kind of seen this one through. Second vote is for the labor cost for the streetlight conversion at $73,972. And the last one is the actual materials at $322,349. So where do we stand in terms of money with this once these contracts are awarded? We'll have about $340,000 left from the original appropriation. That's good. I think we put aside about $100,000 in contingency bet, just in case. And like I said, we're continuing to work with Eversource, hoping that there might be some other programs that they're gonna allow us to take advantage of. We worked pretty hard and quick. When I say we, I mean Patrick. Patrick and David Ruggiero did a great job on this one, just to see this through from start to finish. The timeline is extremely tight because we gotta get all this awarded by December 1st? Yeah, 1st. In order to take advantage of this program that Eversource is offering. So that's why this is here before you tonight. Did I miss anything, Pat?
No, the only thing I just mentioned is that David Ruggiero did a great job putting together the Green Communities application, the grant application. So he started, he's the energy manager that we share with the town of Norwood and Sharon. When he started July 1, he hit the ground running with this. So he filed everything we needed to file with the state as far as the Green Community Grant. So just really want to give a shout out to David and all the hard work that he did too. So.
Great. And I'd just say thank you, Patrick. I think this is a great project, buying the lights from Eversource, converting them to LED, and we'll reap the savings going forward after the initial costs. So, anybody else have any comments or questions?
This will be completed in a certain period of time? How long until we get them out?
Yeah, so in order to qualify for certain incentives from Eversource, the installation needs to take place prior to June 30th of next year.
Oh, wow, so that'll be quick.
Pretty quick.
What's the ongoing maintenance? I know LEDs have a long lifespan, but I mean, the town will take over ongoing maintenance of replacing light bulbs, but that won't be
We'll take
particularly
over.
burdensome, I wouldn't imagine.
For what I envision, and we haven't really gotten that far in it, the money that we figure we need to get about a year under our belts. And whatever we save there, obviously will likely go towards other departments, but I'd also park, I don't know, $50,000 or $100,000 in the budget initially from that savings, just so Drew can kind of keep a very close eye on it. And if we need to get some Anderson Electric or whomever to come in and take care of it, that gives us enough of a buffer. Once we get 3 to 5 years under of history there, we'll adjust that budget accordingly.
So there wouldn't be any special equipment that the town would need to buy? We'd probably sub it out, the maintenance?
I expect that. I mean, we have the bucket truck, but I don't really envision our people doing a lot of that work. I think you need to be specialized with that. That's one of the reasons why we bid out the labor separately on this
Sure,
one.
makes sense.
Great. Nancy? Oh, sorry, Jim?
I would just comment that I've liked this project since the beginning. It's green, number one, which is really important. Number two, we're gonna save some money, love that. The break even, I think, is only a couple, 3 years out, based on what I saw some months ago. But it's also important to note that these are better lights than what we have today, and
Brighter.
they're much better, and they are in our control to keep them lit, which is not the case today. So I think we've got a win, like literally all the way around here. So I'm just loving this project.
Thanks. Nancy?
I will add that my son Noah also agrees, because he can't stand it when the street light is out. It affects his basketball playing, and he knows that the LED are much better. So he has been all about this. So,
Good to know.
yes. So, ready for?
Ready for motions?
All right, I will make a motion to approve the purchase and sale and license agreement with Eversource to acquire the streetlights, and to authorize the town administrator to sign the purchase and sale and license agreement.
Second?
So a motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion to award the IFB contract number 2022-06 LED streetlight conversion project labor to Cavello Electric in the amount of $73,972.
Second?
So a motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, I'm sorry. A motion to award the bid contract number 2022-07 LED streetlight conversion project materials to Graybar Electric Company in the amount of $349.14.
Second.
So a motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I will make a motion to approve the request of James Kelleher, Knights of Columbus, for a one-day all-alcohol beverage license on December 10th, 2021, from 4 to 11 at 137 Stone Street.
Second?
Motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion to accept with gratitude the following donations. Galanis, revocable trust to library gift account, Ruth Sonnenberg to the Veteran Services Hometown Hero Program, and Cliff Snuffer Jr. to the Veteran Services Hometown Hero Program.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Town administrator report?
Sure, just a couple of items here. Department heads have started the process of working on their FY '23 budgets. I expect everything to be in the system sometime early to mid-December. I'll start working on the budget with Jody and Lisa shortly thereafter. I'm hoping to have a draft sometime in late December, early January. I received word earlier this week that the open space and recreation plan has been approved, and we received the final approval letter. I'm working with Landis, and I asked her this evening to get it up and online so that the residents can view that. Conservation's aware of it, and go forward with that and start working on identifying some of the projects in that plan there. Quick update on the middle school project, and I'm sorry, I'm reading from my phone. The project scope and budget agreement with the MSBA is fully executed. The town received the project funding agreement from the MSBA, and we're going to return that probably tomorrow or something. Upon execution, the town, we expect that the MSBA will begin updating, will begin the design phase for the cost and the reimbursement as we move forward. TAP A, who's our architect, is mobilizing their design team and sub-consultants. They're starting to do the work. They were on that the next day or two after the override vote. Next meeting of the building committee is Tuesday, December 12th at 6 p.m. And I just received a text that the finance committee changed their appointee from Susan Lawson to Ally Hamilton. Susan wanted to step back. And just a reminder, town office is closed on Thursday and Friday in honor of Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving, and that's it for me.
Great. Any questions for Jim?
One quick comment on the budgets, as you're starting to pull those together, just want to remind that we want to make sure we're putting some money in there for the celebration that we'll have in a couple of years as the town celebrates its 200th
Okay.
Anniversary.
Thank you. I will be sure to do that. And also, while we're leading up to this, if there's anything the board members, usually I come to you in December or so and say, listen, we're going to raise the 2.5% unless anybody has any concerns. I don't see that. I talked to most of you about this, and I'm going to go forward with that 2.5% increase each, as we have in the past. There's some other items in there that we're going to start to set aside money for, as far as the capital stabilization account, to continue to build that to offset the future costs of likely the high school project. We're going to probably start to put more money back into OPEB and stabilization as we were doing pre-COVID, and take down the unemployment budget, because we had built that up to, I think, 350 or 4, take it back down to pre-COVID numbers. So there's going to be a lot of adjustments. It's going to take me a month or two to get it all done, but we'll get it done in time before the end of January. So that's it.
Great. Ben?
What was the date that we had established or put out there for the closure of the warrant for the Springtown meeting?
I believe it's January 11th.
Thanks.
So it's the first meeting back in the new year.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
So I was going to say, I had it here.